I'm really excited and grateful to you both taking time off from your extraordinarily busy days. What Paul said, we're going to talk local. I think the trust data that we released actually in Cannes in June was all about how we're migrating in a world from we to me, with trust in institutions having really collapsed over the last several years. Where does trust live? And trust lives locally. It's everyone in my community, in my environment. So today we're going to explore, I think, what is a local moment and how can leaders build trust through scale, by proximity, by connecting with people. And really pleased to have our two guests with you. First, please join me in welcoming Dr. Chevy Humphrey, who's the president and CEO of the Griffin Museum of Science and Industry, an icon of Chicago. Chevy leads the world's largest science museums right here in Chicago with a focus on innovation and community partnership, a passionate champion of STEM education, and has created immersive learning experiences that spark curiosity for learners of all ages. And before joining Griffin, she led the Arizona Science Center for 15 years. So thank you for being here. And joining Chevy on stage with me is Chancellor Juan Salgado, who leads the City Colleges of Chicago, serving more than 73,000 students across 7 colleges. And throughout his career, Juan's been a powerful advocate for education as a pathway to opportunity. He's also a MacArthur Fellow and president of the MacArthur Foundation board and a board member of the Obama Foundation, and serves as a Class C director of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. And fittingly began his own journey at community college. So let's start in on the topic at hand. How do you both view trust in your institutions or institutions of your kind? Trust has been under pressure, I think, both in education, in the world of science, particularly in this past year. How are you seeing trust play out in your world?
So I am in higher education, although I'm at a community college. I think if you look at what has transpired in terms of trust with higher education, obviously it's been on the decline, particularly our four-year universities. Community colleges have been faring a lot better, still about 56% level of trust among the American public. There's a local reason for that.
Yep.
But I will just say, when you think about higher education, it's still pretty high, even with the decline, I would say. You look at military, small business, police, and then right behind that is higher education. Now, you want to do better than that, but I think we're still maintaining a relatively strong position. As it relates to community colleges itself, and city colleges in particular, we're local institutions. We're meeting people where they're at. We serve folks in a way that's relevant to them, in a way that's comprehensive. And so it's a felt thing, right? When someone has actually felt your presence as an institution and seen the difference that it's made either on your life or on the life of somebody else, that's where trust is built. Trust is built where one human being is meeting the needs of another human being, and I think that's what we do at community colleges to a large degree. But look, we have to be responsive. When you look at trust as it relates to higher education, trust is higher among those people that have actually gotten a degree. If you have gotten some college but not completed, the level of trust is much lower.
Right.
And if you've never accessed it at all, the level of trust is even lower, right? So what does that say? That means we just got to get more people to have access to education, right? And to do that, we got to make it more affordable. That's what people don't like about it right now, to a large degree. And we got to make sure the value proposition is there at the end of the day, that as a result of this degree, you're actually going to have a better life. And that has to increasingly become true. I think the decline in trust in higher education is partly due to the fact that you have so many people out there with too much debt and not the kind of job that they imagined that they would have.
The outcomes aren't there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chevy?
Well, museums, most people see as repositories of collections. And people love to see, our coal mine, our baby chicks, all the things that are exciting, but we're actually spaces and places to have people come to feel that they belong. This is their space and place. And we also, as museums, have to lean into our community because we serve all. We don't just serve higher education, students that get college degrees. We serve all people. And so we have to make sure that we create a space, safe space and place for them to be able to have these difficult discussions, make sense of the world around them, understand humanity, understand science. And so we are an open place. There was a famous founder of science centers in the country called Frank Oppenheimer. And I'm sure you've seen his brother's movie, Oppenheimer. But Frank Oppenheimer said, no one ever fails a museum. Mm-hmm. And so having a space and a place for people to critically think, to problem solve, to learn how to work together, that is really important, but also having a space and a place for convening. And so some of the things we do at the museum is we offer free spaces and places for through events like our back to actually Enter the Summer program, where it's a summer program where it's free to all of the neighborhoods and all of our visitors, as well as we've just celebrated our 200th millionth visitor. We also actually focus in on our NPS scores, and we also ask our visitors, what did you like? What didn't you like? We're not afraid to hear about the negative comments about the museum. We want to lean in and learn from it and grow from it. And those are the things that when your constituents understand and they respect that you listen to hear them, that's very important. You have to understand where they're coming from, and as you said, meeting them where they are. And that's something we try to do, very intentional at the museum.
And does that translate into generational recognition or accommodation of generational interests? I'm thinking of Gen Z and
Yes.
what their relationship to museum might be and what their expectations might be.
I'm glad you asked that question because, prior to 1991, now we were founded in 1933. So we're like 93 years old. And we were free 1991 and before 1991. So we saw an average of 3.5 million visitors a year. Every year. After we started charging in 1991, our attendance went to about 1.5 to 1.6. So 2 million people lost access to our institution. And when I got here during COVID, I heard so many stories of, I got my start at the museum. I became an engineer because I was inspired at the museum, and I got to walk in whenever I wanted to walk in. This was my museum. And I heard this over and over again. So I started during COVID in 2020, and everything was closed. Who starts a job when it's closed? So I got on Zoom. So I leveraged Zoom, and I had over 1,000 meetings with people my first year. And when we would open, I'd invite them in, and I would just sit there and listen to hear what they had to say. I didn't talk about anything about the museum. I said, tell me about the museum. Tell me your thoughts. And I literally wrote down all of those thoughts, all the things that they said we could improve on, and I handed it to our strategic planning consultant, and I said, here's what we need to focus on. I want to see our next strategy and our next focus based on community voice. And we created a strategic plan with strategic pillars that are focused on just that voice in our community. And when I go out and recite those 4 pillars, people said, you heard us. You've got to have that connection, and that's how you build a trust in the community. You have to do what you say you're going to do, and you have to listen to hear.
And that's one of the pillars of trust is integrity, and that's having the integrity to follow through. Juan, I know you recently launched the Food Security for Life initiative with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Partnership's incredibly important. Partnership at a local level is very important. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came to pass and what success is going to look like?
Yeah. So it's part of meeting the moment, right? It's part of building trust. I mean, we have a student body at City Colleges of Chicago that has over 50% food insecurity. That means I have students that are showing up every single day. This is the strongest social capital you can have in the city of Chicago because, by the way, it's important to know, if you are working, you're more likely to be food insecure than if you are not working, right? Goes to reason that my students are working young adults and working adults that as a result of working, it's just not enough for them to have a healthy meal and to understand that they're gonna have another one tomorrow, right? And so we have been doing some things to address that, but wholly insufficient, right? You know, when you're listening to your students, right, you have to really listen, and it's hard. We do a survey to truly understand what's the level of food insecurity at a global level, and then we do conversations with students. Some institutions avoid the survey because they don't want to know. But the hard part is to having the conversations, to really truly understand what that human being is doing on a day-to-day basis to meet their basic human needs. But here's the thing, we can both increase our outcomes, to create more trust in our institution and more connectivity. But we can increase our outcomes by providing more food supports. We can increase our connection, we can increase our persistence, and we can address the human need at the same time, right? So we have this partnership we built with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. We are building markets on our campus where our students can shop, at no cost for healthy groceries. As we speak, on every one of our campuses, there are 10 stations where you can stop by to grab an apple, an orange, a granola bar, a snack that you might need to hold you over for the moment. There's a ready-to-heat meal available for you if you need a meal when you get to campus. And then once a week, and if we raise enough money, we'll do more than once a week. But once a week, you can take up to 5 meals home with you for your family members as well, because you don't live in isolation, right? So, I think a part of building trust is just making sure that you're meeting the moment and meeting the needs of the human beings. And sometimes this is about the mission. We don't do food, but we can do a better job at our mission by partnering with someone like the Greater Chicago Food Depository. And by the way, they can do a better job at their mission as well, because we call it food security for life, because the education is what's going to get you to being able to have the income and the quality of life that you won't need to be, having the food supports on a daily basis. Our students don't show up. They're showing up because, they want to not be in the condition, that they're in economically right now.
As a side effect of the partnership been to bring attention to food insecurity
Yes.
amongst grad students?
Yeah, and to have the right conversations. When you think about food secure students, people, right? You don't commonly think about someone who's working, someone who's working and going to school, someone who's working, going to school, and raising a family, right? Like, I don't think, we've got this right in America, right? You don't think about higher education. Oh, people going to college and they're food insecure? Well, guess what? We are, we're not an anomaly. Food insecurity among college students is really high. Obviously, if you're on a food plan, you think about the traditional student that's at college and they got a food plan. Most students aren't studying that way nowadays. Right. Most students are like my students. They're non-traditional. They're trying to work while they're making ends meet. And so we have to, rebrand, if you will, who that person is, so that it could be better understood.
Well, it's an extraordinary initiative, and I think it does speak to the fact you're engaging with the whole student, and that will only, I think, foster trust. I want to pivot for a moment to sort of the learning environment these days. And when you arrived, we were having a conversation on the previous panel about the future needs of the workforce. and the degree to which today's students are well equipped with the critical thinking that's necessary, or is AI increasingly replacing a muscle that they might have had for thinking, for learning. And I know, Chevy, you're a big STEM education advocate. How are you thinking of this moment relative to AI, its incorporation within education and curriculum, and what you think the implications will be on future members of the workforce?
We serve, we're the number one field trip provider in the state of Illinois. And one of the things that we see is that if you looked at the statistics, third grade reading is the lowest nationally. If you can't read, you can't study. You can't critically think, you can't problem solve. So we have a problem with third graders and their reading. And so what we try to do is we try to provide hands-on experiences to get them excited, because you learn by doing. You remember when you touch something. You remember when there's a reaction. You remember when you're working with others. And encouraging students and inspiring them to actually want to get engaged in learning and doing more is an approach that we take. And it's truly using AI as a platform and as a tool to help inspire our young people to engage in learning. And so that's one of the ways that we do it at the museum.
So is it likely that as you're bringing AI into the museum, it could be the first time a student's encountering AI?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we try to use that AI as an opportunity to take their learning beyond that. And they're getting it on. A lot of people think that everyone has a cell phone, and everybody doesn't have a cell phone.
That's right.
And so we provide sort of an introductory of, here are tools that you can use to learn more. But you also have to understand, what's fact and what's fiction. And teaching that problem solving and that critically thinking skill set, along with collaboration and talking to others, will help build upon that learning environment. And it's about lifelong learning. And that's what we really try to do at the museum.
And Juan, your students, how are you helping them navigate the AI moment in their learning?
Let me just first say, so much learning does happen outside of the classroom. And it's really important for us to continue to recognize and make sure that all people from all communities have access to all the learning opportunities outside the classroom. Having said that, the classroom is really important. And we need to stay relevant. We need to stay up to date. And we need to think about, particularly in AI, this is going to cut across every one of our career paths. At City Colleges of Chicago, we've organized ourselves to really meet the demand in the economy. So if you come to us, you're going to see healthcare programs and logistics programs and IT programs and business programs, and wherever there's a hot part of the Chicago economy, we're going to be there, right? Well, in all of those occupations, AI will be omnipresent. It's a skill and a capability that our students going to have across the curriculum. So we are working on making sure that that's integrated, working very closely with our faculty in order to do that. We're going to make AI, just like we do cybersecurity training for all of our employees and all of our faculty. AI training is going to be the same. It's going to be a mandatory part of how people get prepared to serve our students at the end of the day. And then in addition to that, we are also making sure that we have course offerings in AI and machine learning. And so we're working with private industry to do that. And this fall we'll be launching an AI and machine learning associate's degree that will be coming out. We already have a continuing education AI and machine learning academy, and have received assistance from Amazon Web Services, Google, Microsoft, and so that's how we're able to stay up with the changes in technology, is by working with our private sector partners.
I'd like to add to that a bit. I actually went out and spoke to executives at Microsoft Apple, and Amazon. And I asked them, I said, help us build an exhibit on AI technology and quantum and all the things that are happening. And they said, Chevy, you don't need to build an exhibit about AI and quantum. You need to help people learn how to think, how to be critically thinking about the issues and the larger issues in the world, and how they're going to solve those problems. When you help create that sense of intellect in the people that you serve, then they will be better. They will be using the tools of AI and quantum better, because it takes people to fuel the AI and the quantum. And so if you build a baseline of having them understand that these are tools that they can use to expand on their knowledge, that's where you need to focus.
So what is the implication? Because that sounded a little bit like they were pushing it back on you. That they weren't interested so much in helping build the AI exhibit, or as it were. So what are the implications for you when you think about being responsive to that challenge?
I think responsive of actually utilizing the tools and actually having exhibits that show them how this tool, because one of the things that the Apple executive says, many people have an iPhone and they probably only use 10% of the tools that are on that iPhone. So you could take that iPhone and actually create a whole exhibit and actually teach the other 90%. And so there's ways to do that, and engaging with not only children but adults, and getting them to think differently about how they utilize these tools to actually make sense of the world and actually solve problems.
Which makes sense. Juan, what percentage of your students are working?
Around 50% of our students are working.
And so that, I'm going to assume that 50%, they're already having some exposure to AI implications in their workforce.
Without question.
Right?
Yeah, without question. But I think this is why the integration in the curriculum is so important to what Chevy's talking about, right? This isn't about, it's about our faculty figuring out, how do you integrate it into the real world opportunities and challenges that exist in any discipline whatsoever. To do that, you've got to have a core set of skills. You've got to be able to, understand the technology, use the technology, stay current with the technology. But then you've got to integrate it into, your desire to be an engineer or a nurse, right? And that desire comes from a place of wanting to make a contribution, being an educator, right? And so that's at the core of what higher education is all about. How do you take your aspirations for the future and your aspirations for your community in the future and make a career out of it, right? And how now do you do that, with the tool of AI? Right.
So beyond AI, how are you reimagining your education program, particularly when you think about serving underserved communities?
So I think the one thing that we're doing that's really important is making sure that we see ourselves as a system of educational opportunities. I think this is one of the things we're missing right now. Now, I'll give you an example. There was a day when city colleges and our public school system didn't work hand in hand. If we are going to reimagine education, then the education institutions, have to be more integrated. They have to work more together. And they have to bring their relative assets to bear for the well-being of the people that are accessing these education institutions. And so we built the strongest working relationship ever between our public school system and our community college system. That means we can drive curriculum into schools while students are in high school. That means, the knowledge that our faculty have, can be, shared with high school students even before they're in college. That could spur, creativity, ingenuity, could spur on what a young person, decides to do with their life. It allows them to experiment earlier on in life, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing the same thing with our four-year universities. We're talking about trust. One of the things that we're suffering from, if you will, in terms of the decrease in trust in higher education is the fact that higher education does not work as well together as it should work together. It's a series of institutions that are just trying to build their own brand, and promote their own brand and sell their own brand, right? With a varied amounts of price points and a confusing system. We've got to be clearer about that. So we are literally in Chicago at the forefront of being able to hand a ninth grader and their parent, a map that says in this career area, you can come to city colleges, you can go to that four-year university, you can graduate with this particular degree, you can do it in a shorter period of time, and at the end of the day, your total all-in cost is going to be this much less, okay? So I think part of it is just that doing that really well. And then the second part is, again, partnering with private industry. It's really hard for us to keep up with certain things. And so I'm going to give you a really good example of how we're keeping up, and that's in cybersecurity. We have partnered with IBM. IBM has a platform that they use to train their employees and to train their clients' employees in cybersecurity. It's called the Cyber Range. They are partnering with us. We will now house the Cyber Range at City Colleges of Chicago. What does that mean? That means we get all of the software updates, the exercises, we get the training from their trainers to our faculty, and we don't just get it on a one-time basis, we get it on an ongoing basis. Our students now have a competitive advantage. Employers now will have the ability to have the workforce that they need. We are doing more and more of that in partnership with private industry, because with all the criticisms of higher education, in terms of are people really going out and getting the jobs that that they're looking for, we need a little help from private industry in a very changing, dynamic marketplace to be able to actually do that.
But that's smart on so many levels, both for your platform, but also for the private industry. I mean, for IBM, because they're getting access to prospective workforce that they're going to need because their needs are changing so rapidly. And I think your point's well made relative to so many of the schools that have been sort of having a challenging year are operating on their own, and they're navigating a very lonely moment, and they're not benefiting from the premise of a collective approach to some of the challenges they're facing.
The survivors and the winners in higher education are going to be the collaborators.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there was the piece over the weekend about the University of Chicago and some of the financial challenges they're facing because of decisions they made 20 years ago, and that they're going to have some creative thinking to crawl out of that. Chevy, I wanted to pivot for a moment and think about community partnership and how you after 15 years in Arizona, how you look at Chicago as a unique environment, a unique community in which to operate, and what's been exciting you about how you've been able to advance the museum further into the community.
What's really exciting about Chicago, coming from Arizona, in Chicago people are more vocal. And it's been very exciting.
You know what they think?
Yeah, you know exactly what they think. And in that 1,000+ meetings, I think I'm now on my 9,000th meeting, and I've been there 4.5 years. So I'm still meeting with people. So I will just give you an example. We actually went out, and I actually went out and talked to over, 60 groups, community groups, and went to their meetings in their space and asked questions. One of my first early on meetings, I said, well, what can the museum do? I mean, what can we do different? And it was with the Jackson Park, Jackson Park Advisory Council. And a woman, I'm going to stand up a little bit, I was sitting up at the counter and she was looking towards me. She goes like this. This is how we've looked at the museum for over 50 years. That was powerful. And I sat down with her and we talked and had many conversations. I gave her my cell phone number. I said, call me anytime. I want to know more about, why you feel that the museum has turned their back on you. And then she went through this whole piece of I could just walk in whenever I wanted to walk in. It was a free museum. And now you've created a barrier. I can't afford to come to your museum. And I'm listening to all of this as a new person. I'm like, we've got to change this. And so we've created a whole strategy over the next 10, 12 years of becoming free again. But we're going to be creating spaces and places so that we're free in every corner of our building. Our museum is 1.4 million square feet of space. We're on 30 acres. And so the first entry that you come in the front doors and you have to pay. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create spaces like a south portico, an east park, a west pavilion that's a student and community center, and our north portico area where people are going to be able to come in and actually be able to belong and discuss and convene and come together, and pulling that paywall in so that there are free spaces throughout the museum so people can come without coming in the building. And answering to their request of having this space. This is my museum, and that's actually one of our pillars. Is MSI is my museum. We want to make sure that people still feel that this is their museums, because we're only stewards at this institution, and we're only stewards to ensure that we are supporting the community need. And so, in every corner, we're going to have free spaces for people to come and belong and feel that it's their space and place. And we have the big goal of making it free again. And they're helping to come around and work with us on how we create that plan to become free again. But you've got to set big goals. I mean, John F. Kennedy said, we don't do things that are easy. We do things because they are hard. This is going to be very hard, but this is what the community needs, and this is how we build trust and continue to build trust.
That's fantastic. So do you have a timetable?
I have a timetable, but I don't think my board wants to tell you what our timetable is. But we're moving forward. Our South Portico is actually going to be opening hopefully in the beginning of 2027. But it's actually, we've tried for 50 years to open it. This was the original entrance to the Columbian Exposition, 1893 Columbian Exposition, and it's never fully been open. And this will be a space and a place where people can walk from Jackson Park into the museum. And we are so thrilled about that. And they're thrilled about that. And so one of the other things I think that was very instrumental was that every meeting I went to, every person at that meeting got my cell phone number. I gave every community member, every person I met with, my cell phone number. It made them feel that they had access to a voice. None of them have ever disrespected my time or any of that. They only text when they need something. They only call when they need something. But I trusted them enough to give them my cell phone, and they felt that they still give me that respect and trust as well. That's a relationship. And that's the second pillar, meaningful relationships in our strategy. We have to live it. And we also have to do the same within our organizations. We needed to have our organization reflect what our community looked like in our teams and what we do and how we create values within the organization. Because if you don't have those values of trust and values of serving our community inside your organization, one person can't do it alone. We have to all have the same goal and the same focus.
And so that's meant a transformation amongst your own colleagues in terms of how they show up. I mean, what I think you both have just been talking about as leaders, there's deep transparency, both individually, but as it relates to what your institutions are about. What's been the change journey like at the museum amongst your colleagues, embracing your vision?
It goes to our volunteers. I have a Val, who's a volunteer, and she will text me and say, well, this visitor said this about this, and this sign isn't the right thing, and this is what we need to do. You start seeing and hearing people tell each other. And we found that they've been empowered to make their own decisions on how to do things differently. And sometimes you walk in and like, that's different. Well, visitors don't like that, so we changed it. And it's like you're empowering them to have their own decision-making platform to make change. And so you can't just, everything can't just come from the top. It flows together. And so that's something that we've built in the organization. Yes, it's not perfect, But you know what? We're a lifelong learning organization, and we need to live by that.
So I'm going to open up for questions from the audience in just a couple of minutes. But Juan, you're both leaders who navigate the ups and downs of the world, both in terms of optimisms and concerns. I'm just curious from each of you, what are sort of the things that are keeping you up at night at the moment on either the continuum?
So on the keeping me up at night, my goodness, our freedoms and democracy. I chair the MacArthur Foundation as well, and it's not just the freedoms that we commonly think about. There's an attack on even the freedom to give, to give of your own money, right? To give to the causes that you believe are the right causes. We've had to fight in philanthropy for the continued freedom to give. And that's not something I thought we would need to, fight for.
Even that's been politicized.
Even that's been politicized. Even that has had certain pretty, damaging potential actions that have been averted. And it's a promising story because it's both, if you will, the full political spectrum came together and said, we cannot allow that to occur. It's not good for anybody if that occurs. And yet, resource had to go to making sure that that was averted at the end of the day. So I think those freedoms, but I think at the very local level, which is where I live on a daily basis, 50% of my students are Latino. Okay, and if you're Latino in this city, you're a target. If I'm wearing a suit, they probably won't come up to me. But I was in my gardening clothes the other day going to Home Depot, and my wife said, take your passport, okay? Because the car is a little old, it's a little junky, and you could be stopped, right? And I'm not exaggerating. The staff of a local alderman, who are both citizens, were taken away the other day. They were released after 6 or so hours, but they were put in custody, right? And so my students are facing that, on a regular basis. And then part of the reason why we're launching the supports, if you will, not just food supports, but we are going to provide unrivaled student supports, full stop, with our resources. In fact, mental health and wellness is the first one we tackled. We have no waiting list. We went from 19 full-time people to over 47. We do all of our counseling in-house, 18,000 counseling sessions last year for our students, because all of this is creating an exacerbation of mental health crisis in our communities, in particular among our students, and we're just at the very beginning point of a reduction in food supports and a reduction of healthcare supports, right? And so all of that creates I would say toxic stress that needs to be addressed. And so that's among.
Has there been an impact on attendance in recent weeks, given the environment?
So among our adults, yes. Our adult education, which includes English as a second language, has declined by 6%. But interesting enough, our credit programs have been growing. And growing tremendously, and they continue to grow this year. I think our message to the community is there's no better or safer place for you to be, more supportive place for you to be than City Colleges of Chicago. And going back to trust, when you're responding to the moment, in ways that, aren't political, right? They're about human beings, right? Those human beings understand what kind of an institution you are. Responsive one, to their well-being. And that really matters, and it reverberates.
Yep. Chevy?
It really does matter. What keeps me up at night is how do we help that next generation make sense of the world around them? I mean, our young people have dealt with more than probably any of us. And they're trying to make sense of the world around them and still try to prevail and grow. And that's something that's really, worrisome. And I carry my passport around as well because I actually was a part of this 19 years ago in Arizona when, I don't know if you've heard of Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Sheriff Joe Arpaio and the SB 1070, where the Governor Brewer signed a bill that gave law enforcement officers the ability to racially profile, and going through the same thing that we're going through today. And in Arizona, I worked at Arizona Science Center, and like, what can a science center do? And so I called a colleague and I said, can I book this exhibit? I'll pay you double if you give it to us, if you let us have it. And we brought an exhibit called Race Are We So Different? And when we brought that exhibit to Arizona Science Center, Race Are We So Different? We had people from all walks of life, all cultures come in and actually have a conversation and discussion about what they were going through, what they experienced. So what keeps me up at night is our programming enough? Are we doing enough to support our community? And so every night at 3 a.m., I wake up and I'm thinking, what more can we do? How can we help our community? Because even though you may not think it's painful in every community, but it's more painful in our Black and brown communities, and that's who we serve. So we need to lean in and do more and step up. So when you wake up at 3 a.m., think about that and send me ideas.
Good. There's our challenge for everyone. Questions from the audience? Oh, there's one going to be over here on the far right.
Hi, I'm Amber Marthinson. I'm from the University of Florida. My question is for you both because we were talking about AI earlier and implementing it in universities and colleges, and then also talking about third graders and the younger students in America that are lacking critical thinking because of AI. There's also studies about how high school students are their test scores are becoming lower in math and in writing and reading. My question for you guys is how you think we can find the balance between implementing AI in institutions and also figuring out like how to make sure they're still critically thinking, just especially in younger students, making sure they have the critical thinking first before they go into colleges and they're using AI for later in the workforce.
I have one. Pay our teachers more. Mm-hmm. Pay our teachers more and provide them with tools with professional development to understand and how to handle the pedagogy. The pedagogy has to switch. It can't just be one way. It's got to be a multitude of ways of learning, a multitude of ways of engagement. And so if you invest in the very people that are inspiring these young kids day to day, it's really important and it's impactful. And so if you all are working with any funders or anyone that's out there helping, K through 12, support the teachers. I'm sorry.
That's great. In addition to that, there is this unique opportunity here where, AI may give us the capability, I have to be very intentional about this, but AI may give us the capability to free up teacher time for a stronger and more enduring relationship with students. Actually more critical thinking, right? So if you think that there are tools that will allow you to learn the core materials, and the core skill sets, which are incredibly important, and I believe will continue to be important, right? And they're especially important for, students that come from, more marginal communities or lower income communities, as those skill sets are door openers or door closers. And so if you think AI can help with that, then your teachers now will have the freedom to do, again, more critical thinking about how do we use technology? How do we think about waste, for God's sakes? Every one of these devices that we have, they have so many materials in them, right? Rare earth, okay? Materials in them. We throw them away. like it's nothing. That rare earth, right? What are we going to do with that? How are we going to repurpose that? Young people thinking about these things, I think we're going to be able to do a lot more of that. But that also means that there might need to be a different kind of balance between preparation time and teaching time. Right now our teachers are, and this is a tough conversation in union negotiations about, teacher time versus, and maybe there's a breakthrough here. Maybe through AI, teachers can get the more prep time that they need, right? And students can get more of an instruction that they need.
Right, and change the whole workflow. Yep. Is there another question? No, right here.
My question is sort of the opposite of the what keeps you up at night, and it's what gets you excited and gets you up in the morning. Like, what's the opportunity you're thinking about right now that you can't wait to get started on, or by your involvement, it's going to 10x?
Yeah. Well, I will say, if you meet any one of my students, you'll have, 70,000+ reasons, to be super excited about, what's happening in the world and what's possible in the world. I just came right now from a presentation that one of my students was doing, where he's literally, repurposing a whole bunch of computer component parts, for friends and family and people in the community. That's the reason why I mentioned, how we're wastefully, throwing away things that are not useful to us. They might be useful to someone else. He's putting them together, right? And he's on a mission, to make sure that we're a less wasteful people, and we're a more creative people, right? And a more caring person, and let Dewey do it, okay? Is the name of his enterprise, if you will.
Love it.
And so people like him, Juan is his name, are just incredible. And so I think that we're missing the boat a little bit. Might say a lot, right? We are not noticing enough. Okay, there are innovators and creators, and there's just a world of talent out there among our young people. Anytime I hear somebody say anything negative about this generation, I can think of 10 more positive things about this generation than my generation, okay? It's really exciting to see and feel and experience.
Mine is creating more aha moments. Right now, we are building a new exhibit called Powering the Future, and it talks about future of energy. Well, energy is really important because you can't use a cell phone, you can't do any of those things. And we need to help our young generation get inspired about how they're going to lean in and help create solutions for new energy. So an example would be, we not only have exhibits where we talk about the future of energy, but we actually have experiences. Like, we're building a 2.5-story slide for adults and kids, and when they go down the slide, they're creating energy that will actually fuel the power grid that they just left. So they can see instantly how it works and why it's so important. And we also have a coal mine. And, we wouldn't have what we have today if it weren't for coal, but how do we save our planet? How do we create, this safe space and place for future generations? How do we take that? So we show every part of the spectrum to see where we've been and where we need to go. And so that inspiring those young people is so important because they ask questions. And that's what gets me inspired every day, is when they come in and they ask the questions. My 6-year-old grandson, I was just with him this weekend, and he said, well, why can't we solve all these problems, Tutu? And I'm like, well, we can, you can. And he starts going, he goes, well, let's Google it and give me books. I want to learn. That's what we have to do to get our young generation thinking about the future. So those are some of the things that I get excited about. And that's why I wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning wondering, what else can we do? Because that inspires someone. One more story. So JPL, there's a woman that is at JPL now. And she actually came to the museum when the museum was free. Her mother dropped her off because she couldn't afford daycare. So the museum was her space and place. And so she actually called me and she said, "Can I just take you to lunch?" And I'm like, "Okay." So she took me to lunch and she says, "I just want to thank you because I got to have the museum as a resource to help inspire me to actually be a scientist at JPL. And if there's anything you need, you let me know and we'll provide it at JPL." That's the kind of stories that you want. She is now thriving, but she was excited and inspired by her experience.
Love it. Last question here.
Thank you. I want to direct this to Juan, and I just want to say, Juan is such a great example of the power of public-private partnerships, and obviously City Colleges is critical in building partnerships with companies like Accenture and Aon related to your apprenticeship program, and tens of thousands of students have a career in no small part because of your personal efforts. So, and this is game-changing not only for these students, for the students' families and the communities. And I'd love to hear you speak about what's next for the apprenticeship program that you've been helping to drive. And thank you.
So this is what I said earlier, so much learning happens outside the classroom that's critical importance. Well, obviously, in the work-based learning environments, that's where you get the acceleration. And that acceleration, it's not just for our students, but it's for the companies that we partner with. And thank you, Accenture's been an incredible, leading partner of ours in opening up doors of opportunity. But those doors have been fruitful, for the company just as much as they've been, fruitful for our students. And so what's on the horizon for us is we're going to double, triple, if not quadruple this, right? And we're looking at removing, some of the barriers, one of which, by the way, is we're going to become the hiring partner if necessary. So we think this is going to be an accelerant where, companies will be able just to tap into City College students for an entire year, with City Colleges being the employer of record, for that entire year. Now, it's still a work-based learning opportunity in your company with the, relevant experience. And let me be real clear, this is not a, time-bound internship. What we're doing with companies like Accenture is it's a real job that the students are stepping into, that if they do well at, they will get on a full-time basis. And at Accenture and our partner companies right now, over 80% of those students prove that they can do that particular job and get hired on a full-time basis. And so, what you're getting is talent from your local community. And a company like Accenture shouldn't exclusively hire from the local community, but there has to be enough opportunity for that to happen so that any kid from the Chicago community can look out and see the abundance of opportunity in their city and say, what, that's for me. And I think that, that's the thing that drives America, is when anyone in any part of our country, whether it's rural or urban or suburban, can look out into this abundant economy and, see themselves within it and then actualize, that becoming a reality. And I think that's part of, talk about trust, that's part of what we're struggling with, is that not enough people from enough places, right, and can see that happening for themselves.
Well, it's a perfect note to close on, because you've demonstrated, Juan, and both of you, Chevy, the power of partnership, the power of local, and connecting with community. So I want to thank you both for your leadership. I wish you bright days ahead and realizing all of your ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.